Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. Today I'm speaking with Shilpi Ghosh, who leads Roche's global CDMO operations, managing relationships with multiple external manufacturers across many continents and overseeing the commercial aspects of Roche's external manufacturing strategy. With a background that spans chemical engineering, supply chain leadership, and now pharmaceutical manufacturing at one of the world's largest pharma companies, Shilpi brings a unique perspective on the evolving challenges of managing CDMO partnerships in today's complex landscape. Shilpi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Great to have you join us on this podcast, getting a deep dive into how you think about external manufacturing and the different aspects of it. But before we do, I thought it would be good to start off with a bit of a focus on Roche's ongoing investment in oligonucleotides. Because, of course, you've built a new RNA hub in Basel. There's over 60 scientists focusing on the development and delivery. And I believe you're quite involved in it yourself. So it'd be great to start there and just to talk about what it is that Roche is doing and your involvement.
So the RNA hub in Basel is quite important, and it focuses on development of oligonucleotides. Its focus is on early stage development. Now, how is our involvement? We don't have major internal oligonucleotides capabilities in terms of manufacturing. So we completely rely on CDMO. We have a strategic partnership in South Asia, where we have even made some investments, joint investments out there. We utilize the manufacturing capabilities of that CDMO out of South Asia. That is our strategy, that we will continuing both development and commercial manufacturing of oligonucleotides through our trusted partners.
And so it's all of the manufacturing will be in South Asia. Would there be plans further down the line to bring in other regions as well?
There will be, as the portfolio increases and the volume increases. We are in discussion, for example, some partners in the North America region, specifically in the US. So that is all in the development stages. So as more products and partners come in, we will be expanding the capability beyond South Asia as well.
Okay, great. So in terms of your role, how does it tend to change when you're working on these early stage pipeline assets versus existing commercial products? How does what you do need to change and flex?
First, I would like to mention is when we do this sourcing of the early stage products or even the manufacturing of the early stage products at CDMOs, we do it in close collaboration with development. So while I'm in the commercial organization, but we also working very closely with development to get these products up and running. The focus is very different. When we start with early stage products which are still in development, the focus is extremely high technical capability of the CDMOs in specific modalities, followed by process development capabilities. This is very important in combination with timeliness. Timeliness becomes a big factor in those projects. So these becomes the major factors while the products are in the early stages of development. Not to mention that we also focus on sustainability already during that stage. In the development stage, because that's important for us. Now, when we switch into the commercial phase, as it goes closer to the commercial phase, there's a shift. There are other factors that start playing in. And a couple of those factors is launch readiness. You know how ready the CDMO is in terms of launch. Then what becomes very important is capacity, commercial capacity availability. On the development phase, also the development capacity is important along with capability to do process development. But in the commercial phase, the commercial capacity and of course cost starts playing a very big factor. I have to mention, yes, a lot of these products are in the primary care side of things. And there the cost competitiveness starts playing a big factor when it comes to commercial.
And how far down the line do you tend to look? Are you thinking someone is going to be your early stage partner and then you're going to tech transfer at some point? Or are you ideally looking for someone who could take you all the way up to launch readiness?
Ideally, the second one. If we can select a partner already during the development stage and carry that through to commercial readiness or launch readiness, that's our preference because you avoid a tech transfer, number one. Number two is there's familiarity and there's also interest for building a relationship because you're starting all the way from development and then carrying it on to commercial. Quite often what we see is even if we are able to do that with certain partners, at a later stage, because of capacity reasons or cost reasons or other geopolitical reasons, we have to add additional suppliers as we go through the commercial stages of the product life cycle. So that happens quite often. And that strategy is fine. We would like to avoid those transitions because it also plays an important role in timeliness.
Well, cost and timelines.
Exactly.
Taking a step back a bit, it'd be good to understand your overall approach to how you manage all these various different suppliers. I mean, people have different frameworks that they like to use for SRM. How do you tend to segment the different contract manufacturing relationships you have? And then what does that mean in terms of how you communicate, how you engage with that tier? What does that look like for you?
What we have right now is in close collaboration with our procurement function, a very defined SRM process, which basically takes into factors different aspects. For example, typically operational performance, fit for future, cost effectiveness, all those typical performance factors it takes into account. We run this once a year and we categorize all our CDMOs into 4 categories: strategic, key, bottleneck, and standard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And based on which categories they fall in, the line of action is defined for each CDMO. For example, if we would look for a strategic supplier, then we would look for multi-product, multi-technology kind of capabilities where we want to put multiple products because that's beneficial for a strategic supplier. And then also engage the supplier potentially at an early stage of development. So those are typically attributes that are there for strategic suppliers. We expect that risk-taking will be both sides. So if it's a strategic supplier, then we would have risk sharing between 2 sides. The other important is for strategic suppliers, we also consider co-investments. Yeah, so these are a couple of big attributes that we consider to manage, and this really differs depending on which segment they are. Of course, you also have the other end of the spectrum, which means certain suppliers you want to exit. On one hand, not the strategic, but also so depending on where they are falling, what are the let's say strengths and weaknesses, we decide whether we'll go in the strategic side of things or whether we will, keeping a standard supplier is also not so bad. Everybody doesn't become strategic. But then you also have the other side of the spectrum where we want to exit certain suppliers for different reasons.
What typically would a risk-sharing agreement look like that you'd encourage?
A risk-sharing, I can give you a very specific example, which has been quite some discussions on this one. I will not quote on the drug substance supplier, but I will go more on the, fill-finish side of the risk-taking would typically be, we would want our suppliers to procure all the raw materials or everything that they need to do a specific operation. So say, for example, they have to get some packaging materials. So what we say is that, look, if there is a risk-sharing benefit out of it, we allow, for example, the suppliers to be performing well. We allow them to procure all the materials at risk based on our forecast. And if something goes wrong, that we are not able to use those materials, then we also take the risk of paying for it. But at the same time, if the supplier gets all those materials and they do a damage because of one reason or the other, there's a liability involved in it. And the liability question comes up quite often. Under what circumstances am I liable? Yeah. So on one hand, we say, okay, you procure it. If we don't use it, we will pay it. But on the other hand, you procure it, but for some reason or other you damaged it or there was a faulty material, then you take the liability of that. So that's kind of the risk sharing. There are many, many other aspects where we do risk sharing. We expect that there will be a risk sharing approach for strategic suppliers.
Do you find that whether that's risk sharing agreements or co-investment, do you find that those types of models are successful in incentivizing the CDMO to have skin in the game and to do better work? What do you think works best to create those real win-win partnerships?
Absolutely. I wouldn't say that these kind of partnerships are all CDMOs. You just don't have these kind of partnerships. Where you decide to have these kind of partnerships, I always say, strategic partnerships, what does this mean? The word partner defines it, right? It's a partnership. It's not a transactional relation, which means it is supposed to be lasting for long. Yeah? There's an imperative behind it, right? Now, of course, I'm not going to say it's a marriage because divorces do happen because of different reasons. But it is a partnership which is supposed to last long, right? So if we are able to incentivize in terms of co-investments, in terms of risk sharing, in terms of putting multiple products, what we expect is the partner is also growing his business, the CDMO. On the other hand, we are enabling the big pharma to achieve the cost targets and volume targets and stuff like that is expected from them. I think it's a win-win situation if you do this. And we have seen in certain cases that we have established very strong relationships which have lasted quite long.
It must be very complex how you would structure not just the agreements, but also operationally, the team on your side, how you match it up with the team at the CDMO side? I mean, I imagine you've tried various different combinations of getting the right people speaking to the right people. What are best practices, would you say, work really well in getting virtual teams from the sponsor and the CDMO to work together?
This is a very interesting topic. One of my bosses always say that there's no ideal organization structure. You pick up the one that best suits you at that point of time. And I believe in that. I would say there are 3 conventional ways of organizing the CDMO organization. One is by technology. You do DSDP, or for example, you do small molecules, large molecules. That's one way of structuring your organization and technology focus then. The second way of organizing is an end-to-end product view or an end-to-end life cycle view. And the third very conventional way is regional. Now, none of this is ideal. It all has its pros and cons. So we picked up initially the end-to-end. We did experiments with that and it worked very well. There are some benefits out of that. And now we are thinking of, again, going back more technology. So DS and DP. Yeah, so that's our thought process currently that we are floating through. We have a very well-structured CDMO governance process where we have defined the different levels of teams that should be put in place. Yeah, so and that is strictly followed. For example, the lowest level, a joint management team, then a JSC, a joint steering committee, and going up ESC and even SRM. Yeah? So that structure is very well followed. What we try to do is, while we give opportunities for people to expand their knowledge in terms of going into newer areas, when we put together, we bring in a small JMT, which comprises of a site leadership, which is like a mini general manager of that CDMO sitting on our side, and the other functions that enable a kind of a representation of a mini site within ourselves, which interacts with the same functions on the other side, on the CDMO side.
So sort of quality speaking to quality, supply chain to supply chain.
Exactly. Quality speaking to quality, MSAT, manufacturing science and technology speaking to the technology guys on the other side, and with an overarching view by the site manager. So who looks after all the aspects of things and ensures that the whole thing is in. So I think it's a combination of function to function matching within the team, but with a very strong governance and oversight process. Because otherwise, when things get stuck, There needs to be a kind of a governance process that allows things to flow upwards.
So an escalation path, as you do.
Escalation path, for example, if you look at the JSC, what we have for certain CDMOs, after the JMT, we have the JSC. There we could example for strategic suppliers, strategic CDMOs, we discuss strategic topics. Yeah, so what are the upcoming topics? We share information with them. What are the products that are coming in Roche's pipeline and how would we want them to support that? So those strategic level discussions as you go. So that structure is then put in place to be enough. Not with everything. Then important to say is we deliberately decide where we put what, because it's not one for all. It's like deliberately you pick up what kind of governance structure that you implement for certain CDMOs.
Yep. Great. You mentioned, Shilpi, earlier on about sustainability and how important that is to Roche. I mean, at a corporate level, the company's committed to reducing carbon footprint by 50% by 2030. And obviously, companies can't do that on their own. And the Scope 3 emissions through the network plays a huge role in that. What's your perspective on that in terms of the challenge that presents to your external manufacturing network, and how are you addressing it?
There are 2 or 3 things out there. First of all, yes, I want to acknowledge that Roche has made very serious commitments on carbon footprint, and the SBTi commitments for us are very, very important. And we would ideally like to see CDMOs also committing with the SBTi approach, but there are other approaches as well. Now, how do we handle this? If you look at the drug substance, drug product split in carbon emission, the heaviness is obviously on the drug substance side of things, because you use enormous amount of solvents, use an enormous amount of water, cleaning. So balance is really on the drug substance as far as carbon emission is concerned. How we handle this? First of all, when we select a CDMO for development, even at the development stage, we look at the capabilities of how they can handle the technical capabilities, which will allow them to handle this topic in the future. So that's one of the criteria that, first of all, we check what are they doing in the sustainability space. For example, have they made external commitments? Do they have plans for sustainability for their own sites? But then when we select it for one of our products, we look at what is the technical capability that they have to develop a sustainable solution. I'll give you an example. Very often for oligos and peptides, we talk of a Gen 2 process, which is a liquid phase process instead of a solid phase process. And there your consumption of solvents are reduced dramatically because you are using much less solvents on one hand. and also improving the PMI. So these are things that we already evaluate when we are selecting a CMO at the development stage. Definitely, we also look at it. If we are selecting a commercial CMO, we would look for it and we would want to have a plan of how, and quite some CMOs actually, we are working on these things, how the Gen 2 process can be developed, because we might be able to launch with the Gen 1 on time, but we want the Gen 2 process that should come in. So that is one way of looking at it. The other thing what we do quite often is we are educating our CMOs, because not all CMOs are at the same level. Specifically, if you go in the Asia side of things and stuff like that, not all CMOs are at the same level. So there we are also educating our CMOs to how to go to the next level of sustainability. You see what I mean? Helping them to understand what they should do. So these are the two things I would say. So we very early on stage or during the evaluation, during the selection, we start evaluating sustainability with capabilities of the CDMOs. Yeah.
Interesting. And I guess there's also collective bargaining, isn't there? So it's not just Roche who's asking for this. If you look at all the other PSCI members of your competitors will also be pushing them in the same direction.
Absolutely. So there's interest for them as well. There's this thinking convention that sustainability means more money. Yes, in certain cases that's true, but there are also examples where you can actually do sustainability and reduce costs.
Okay.
A typical example is flying your product back and forth across the world. So if you reduce that, you are reducing your carbon footprint, but you're also saving money on flying your products all over the places, right? So while, yes, it does require commitments, it does require additional technical capabilities and stuff like that, which does require money, but there are certain areas where you can do sustainability and save, and I've done that for one of our products.
How much of an impact could that make if it's just, I suppose, a more thoughtful supply chain process? Is it quantifiable?
Yes, by the number of legs.
Yes.
Yes, it's quantifiable. We get reports nowadays on sustainability like our mileage. So if we fly across the world for different reasons, then we get, so if you fly a product also, you're doing exactly the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's absolutely quantifiable based on your supply chain, how many legs you have, and if you're flying products out, that what is the impact on sustainability.
So you can capture all of that and build it into the model. Great.
Correct.
Talking about supplier selection, obviously sustainability is becoming an increasingly important part of that. Where does digital capabilities fit within that? I mean, how much are you expecting the CDMOs that you work with to have digital capabilities to be able to transparently pass you the data? What's important for you at the moment on that?
For the CDMO organization or for the CDMO interactions, we are starting to implement digital solutions. Yeah, prior to this, it was all paper-based, and specifically things like batch records, forecasting, everything was mails or paper-based. So we are embarking on that journey of digitalization. It's really at a nascent stage. The biggest challenge, that we face is there is no one standard digitalization solution for the CDMO space. So either we are challenged that we are asked to use the digital solutions of different CDMOs, and more often CDMOs are challenged because every client of theirs is bringing a different solution to them, and they have to live with those 100 different solutions. So I think that is currently the biggest challenge to move digitalization in an aggressive way, because you get a lot of pushbacks. If we are implementing something, just to let you know, so we are in the process of implementing SAP S/4HANA, and as part of that, we are also implementing a exchange tool between our CDMOs and us. But quite often we are faced with this. They are being asked to do similar for different companies with different solutions. So I think this will be the biggest thing going forward, that what will be the globally accepted solution that can be used across the board for managing CDMOs. And I think this is still to come. This is not yet there. So we are in a way, I would say, behind in digitalization compared to other industries. This is extremely important because this is one of the enablers to tackle the cost pressures that CDMOs will have in the future. Because I'm not saying it's the only one, but it's definitely one of the key ones that is becoming important.
Yeah, very interesting. We're running a survey at the moment where we're benchmarking CDMOs, not just in terms of their digitization capabilities, and I think most would say they're at a fairly nascent stage themselves when it comes to this and being able to integrate with a sponsor. But we're also asking, this is also, I think, quite interesting, about the different AI use cases, and not all of them are dependent on a big, expensive integration. When you look at the smaller use cases, batch scheduling or predictive maintenance, visual quality inspection, all of those sort of like smaller use cases, perhaps. Where do you think there's opportunities? Have you got any pilots going on in different places?
You're referring to AI now, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So AI, first thing I'm going to say is AI is becoming a reality. Whether we like it or we don't like it is a different discussion. What happened is after the invention of the internet and having generated data for decades, now it's AI. Yeah. So how do we use that data, which we have generated for decades? So it is becoming a reality. Now we are embarking on AI in a big way, let's put it like that. And I have used AI personally myself and I'm very impressed. It is very effective. Now the thing with AI is it can solve problems in a very wide spectrum of things. The usage can be a very, very wide spectrum. As easy as your meeting minutes, from that onwards to predictive analysis based on data. In between, you have everything more or less. So that's probably a threat in itself. What do you choose? Where do you start from? Yeah. So one of the key things I see is that the level of understanding of big organization like ours, what is the level of understanding across the board for such a for 100,000 people? So that is a very important fact. You have a certain benchmark of understanding across the full board and the company is starting to do that so that they implement in a rightful way. The second part what I see is choose very carefully what you want to start with. You can choose very simple things. I used it for my meeting minutes or simple things like comparing some documents and coming up with comparisons. I can easily say it will save 60 to 70% of one's time. So we will save time. So this is from personal experience I'm telling you, but I've gone through that, yeah. And so once you've selected, the other one which we are experimenting right now is in our CDMO world, deviation management is a big thing, big topic.
Yes, okay,
yeah? Yep. So we are experimenting, we are doing a use case as to how big, if based on the supplier input we get for deviations, how can we use AI to incorporate that into our quality systems without manually typing in everything? And this is going very well. You have to really pick and choose which are the couple of important ones where you can bring efficiency through AI, implement them to the full extent. This would be my thing, implement to the full extent to get the benefit before you start embarking on trying to do everything at the same time. So I would say, where are the pain points? Where are the areas where efficiency is needed? Pick up the right AI solution and then implement full blast. Then realize the benefit of it, go to the next one. Yeah? And combine these, let's say, very specific solutions for certain topics. Combine that with a day-to-day efficiency improvement. Do your meeting minutes in AI. If you have to do some, little things, which AI can help, and if I can save 60% of my time, I'll be more than happy, right? I can then concentrate on something else. So a combination of those two things, very specific topics where you need efficiency improvement, which are more technical, which needs a more specific solution, and a day-to-day usage where you can increase your efficiency.
Good. That deviation management, I've heard that before as being low-hanging fruit, that there's big improvements that can be made with using AI in that space.
Correct.
Shilpi, I guess if you were to sort of reflect a bit more broadly about the current landscape with regards to contract manufacturing and how sponsors engage with it, we've talked a bit about sustainability, we've talked about digitization and some of these new modalities. How do you see that landscape evolving over the years to come? And are there any particular areas which you think that CDMOs should be investing in and building in as you prepare for that future?
See, one thing that I see for the future, and which is also being discussed in the industry, is where will be the focus in terms of disease areas, because that also determines what kind of CDMOs you develop for the future. You see what I mean? So that's very important. What we saw in the at least in the last 5 years, is there was a big focus on the primary care disease areas, which means big volumes, huge pressure on costs, on top of having new modalities. You see what I mean? Now, so keeping all these in view, what I see is that new modalities is going to increase because the complexity of new modalities will increase, but the CMOs cannot be really focused only on new modalities. They really cannot be doing that, So they have to increase first is what I see is global presence to give flexibility. So flexibility is a big word in this case. So they have to focus on global presence. And then, of course, they have to also focus on this AI, digitalization, all these things in order to be able to bring the benefits that will eventually impact their efficiencies and costs. Because if big pharmas are all going in that, you have heard this buzz around obesity, right? I mean, everybody knows this, right?
Of course.
So, that area will demand high cost pressures, right? It will be for sure high cost pressures, yeah? So, therefore, I would say that the CDMO should be, on one hand, focusing on technical capabilities like new modalities, specialization in those, in combination with globalization plus efficiency improvement, which will eventually has an impact on cost if the industry continues to grow in the primary care area. Of course, if we're talking about oncology, specialty care, or oncology or rare diseases, you're talking about a different thing. Yeah. So really, the industry, the capability of the CMOs will depend on where the pharma industries are eventually. As it stands today, at least for the next 10 years, there might be a focus on primary care.
Yeah. And with the ongoing geopolitical uncertainty, which doesn't seem to be slowing down at all, how important is it and how realistic is it to be really flexible as well? Do you think that's going to be an ongoing part of external manufacturing for the years to come?
It will be. I mean, in Roche, we are a bit lucky because we are lucky in the sense when we looked at this situation, the geopolitical situation, what we saw is that both our internal network and our external network, because we have a huge internal network. Okay? So both are quite well positioned in terms of geopolitical, the spread of the network. Yeah. So from that perspective, it became a little bit easier because it was more managing where the outputs are coming from. But I think that's why I said that CDMOs cannot just focus on technical capability and sit in Europe. That will probably not be viable because of two reasons. One is geopolitical, the other one is also cost pressures. What we are doing internally is also we are making some very strategic investments across the world. I'm not going to say in one geography or the other. Yeah. So across the world, we are making strategic investments for our futuristic products, the products that are coming in the future. So we are making, and I think CDMOs will have to also do that hand in hand. Yeah, and most of them are doing it. They are expanding in massive ways where they're present, or they are expanding it in different geographies in a certain way. So they are doing it, and they will have to continue to do that too, for two reasons. One is geopolitical, to have that flexibility. Second is cost pressures that are going to come in the future.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, very interesting. And then, Shilpi, as a final question, I wonder if we could just reflect on you and your career. So starting in chemical engineering in India to your progression to leading global external manufacturing operations. I wonder, as you reflect on that sort of unusual journey, if there's any advice you could share with others who might want to follow a similar career path.
First thing is being in manufacturing in India. I'm quite old. I'm not that young. Yeah, so that was a challenge. I have to first admit that. It was not easy to be in a completely manufacturing world in India. So this was quite a challenge by itself.
What was so challenging?
First of all, I was extracting aluminium, look. That is a dirty industry, I can tell you. And being in manufacturing, in production, where it was a completely men's world, we were actually 2 women in the whole factory in the engineering time. We were young, fresh out of college. So most of our workforce was probably 20 years above, elder to us. Yeah, so managing that kind of workforce in a very rustic. And in India, the other challenge at those times was the workforce was not necessarily highly educated. So all those combination of different factors, it was quite a thing. But it grounds you. That environment grounds you. What I would say is manufacturing across the world in different industries breathe the same. Here in manufacturing, you have that vibe, you have that, the breathing of manufacturing. Yeah. So what you have to constantly do is understand the challenges, focus, clarity, grounded. As long as you are go in with those attitudes, you are able to manage manufacturing. So whichever industry we are talking about, whichever part of the world we are talking about. And that has been my key learning. And that dirty industry actually shaped me in a certain way. How do you focus on certain things and stuff like that? This is what I've learned from that, my first, let's say, four years of chemical engineering, hardcore manufacturing in India. And then in combination with people. See, that's one part of it, yeah, where you as an individual can focus, but then the combination with the right people, yeah. So this is the philosophy I still follow out here, that, when I'm handling manufacturing, clarity with CDMOs. What are we looking for? Yeah, so very clear, expectations and matching that clarity with a clear focus and with the right people. Yeah, so that's what I focus in, and that's what I implement out here. Now, what I have to say is one other skill is just I think extremely important in manufacturing, which I've not done very early, is being grounded. Don't lose the touch with your floor. So that grounding with the floor is very important. And then the lastly, what I say is what I have experienced, because this is my 25th year in Europe. When I moved to Europe is, growing from a very pure manufacturing troubleshooting environment. That was the start of my job. Kind of moved into a more structured approach, a more strategic approach with more process orientation, because what I learned is if those processes and structured approaches are put in place, the reference was to the governance which we have implemented, or for example, performance management of CDMOs. So that structured approach really takes you to a next level with the objective of always a win-win. Because one thing I want to absolutely be clear about, when you work with CDMOs, the win-win scenario is key. Yeah, so it's absolutely key. Yeah, if you don't, you have to always go with the mindset of it's a win-win for both. It cannot be one-sided. So that has been my personal journey. I went from pure manufacturing into supply chain, in some time in ERP implementation linked with that, and then eventually moved into divestment management, and then eventually into CDMO management, which is going pretty well, I would say. No regrets on the moves that I've made and where I stand today.
Great. Shilpi, it's been fantastic speaking to you today. Thank you so much for spending your time and sharing your wisdom.